about the Candidate Development Program. As you know, the developmental opportunity is open from February the 7th through the 24th, so you don't really have a whole lot of time. I have asked the CDP PM at DHS headquarters whether there was any way we could get an extension, any likelihood that they would extend the announcement period, and it is a resounding no. That's because they are on the fast track for this program. In fact, it will be an annual program that they will be announcing, so if something happens that you don't make it this time, you can rework your resume and so on and get ready for the next application period. I would stress that it's terribly important that you follow all instructions in the announcement. If you don't, for example, submit all the forms, they will cut you out of the competition. If you do not answer all the questions, whatever the case may be, you don't meet all the qualifications. So please read everything carefully and make sure you follow it to the letter. You've already heard from Emily. We're delighted to have Emily as one of our TSA Career Coaching Services Executive Coach. Our TSA Career Coaching Service has been around since about the beginning of the formation of TSA, so we're delighted to be able to provide that opportunity to everyone, to you, to your staff, to your leadership. Everyone has a chance to use that TSA Career Coaching Service, and I encourage you to do so. If you have any questions that I can help you with, be sure to go ahead and let me know what those are. And without any further ado, I think we better get on with what the good things that Emily has to tell us about your developing a competitive resume. So Emily, I'll turn it back over to you, and thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Diana. Appreciate it. So, like Diana mentioned, this is only part of the services that are being offered to you from TSA in preparation for this announcement from DHS. So another opportunity that you have is to receive one-on-one consultative help from me and from the Resume Place. And I know I have met a couple of you before. So we'll have the opportunity to talk one-on-one about your resume, and I'll be able to give feedback on it. And in some cases, we'll be sending you on to a team. We have 5 consultants at the Resume Place who will be working really diligently the next week and a half to make sure that your resumes are excellent. TSA is really, really eager to make sure that you're all as prepared as you can be. So we're going to start tonight by looking at the PowerPoint, and I will switch at some point to look at the book that you see here on the in the caption. You guys all should have received these PowerPoints by email, as well as a PDF copy of the book. And if not, you can just let me know in the question box. Okay. So to begin, we're going to just talk about some SES basics so that you get a sense of what the SES is all about. And you can see here from these slides that the bottom left-hand corner says text page 11. That's referring to the book. So if you want to make a note or go back and look at this information later, you can always go back to the book. So SES is at a pretty high level right now. We have almost 8,000 members of the Senior Executive Service. But as you guys probably heard, a lot of folks are going to be eligible to retire soon. So that's why candidate development programs are getting such serious attention right now, because they're helping to address what's going to be a big knowledge gap when our baby boomers leave. So there's up to 1,000 new executives selected in any given year. Only 7% of the current SES came from outside government. About more than 10% are CDP graduates. So you guys know that most of the SES jobs are found in DC. I'm not sure where some of you might be from. I know we had it in our registration. I haven't looked at all of them. I know some of you are in the DC area, but many of you are not. You know that a lot of these jobs are found in DC. So women make up about 1/3 of the SES, and minorities about 1/6. So your particular candidate development program, I won't spend too long on this because it is in the announcement and you can talk with Diana further about this, but is a 12 to 18 month appointment where you remain in your current position, but as a member of the CDP, what you get is a mentoring partnership, which is awesome. You're going to develop an executive development plan, so just a plan for the future. You get some interagency learning, and we'll talk about why that's so important in terms of your ECQs and your SES application. Rotational assignments, you guys know that there's some travel involved there, potentially. But the main thing that you guys are offered as a member of the CDP is that you will get Office of Personnel Management QRB certification. So this is a little bit like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. You guys remember they're searching through all the chocolate bars for just one little gold certificate. Well, that's what you guys are looking for, is you're trying to get this QRB certification. And that means that a qualifying review board from the Office of Personnel Management has given you a big check that says you can be a member of the Senior Executive Service. And so we're preparing today for a candidate development program. It's not quite as rigorous as the QRB certification that you would get upon graduation, but it's great because at that point you can apply for any SES position and you're pre-certified, you're pre-selected in a way. They don't guarantee you a job, but they do provide this pre-selection. I see we have a question, Mark, about the slide. I actually did send it to you already. I saw it the last second that you had registered, and I sent it to the address that you registered with. So you should have that there. Okay. So a couple things to keep in mind on the announcement. And these are just some key features that are in that job description and in the requirements like Diana mentioned. It's a 5-page resume with the ECQs and the tech quals combined into this resume. You guys might have heard about ECQs, or maybe you've written them yourselves, that are 10 pages long. In this case, all of the information in that 10 pages is now in a 5-page resume. You have to incorporate everything into one resume. It's kind of crazy, but this is the new way. This is how most announcements are going to be going over the next few years. That's because President Obama made a new initiative to try to lower the paperwork burden for people applying for jobs in government. And this is one way that it's been interpreted, is that some people are asking for 5-page resumes instead of ECQs. Right now on opm.gov or usajobs.gov, I would say it's kind of half and half. Some jobs require 10-page things and some just require this resume. So today we're talking about the 5-page resume almost exclusively, but if you want more information about those 10-page ECQs, that's in the book too. That's what we call traditional ECQs. So we're going to describe ECQs a little more in depth if that's new terminology to you. You also see in the announcement, you have to have 1-year supervisory experience. That's totally strict, written in stone. So we need to make sure that when you write these resumes, you're making it perfectly clear where you've been a supervisor for at least 1 year, and hopefully at the GS 15 or KBN level or equivalent. So that supervisory experience is really, really important. You guys saw 1 year GS 15. And then, so they're only going to give interviews to the people who get into the best qualified category. That means your resume scored the highest. So if you get into the best qualified category, you'll be interviewed. And at that point, you'll have to submit a reference letter. So that's just something to keep in mind. You probably want to ask somebody for it now, since this whole thing seems to be on a fast track. SF50, that's the document that says you are a federal employee. You're going to need that. Something really important is no cover letters. It says it in this announcement. You saw the announcement. It's like 13 pages long. We'll look at it a little later, but it says anything past 5 pages just gets cut. You only have 5 pages, so do not submit a cover letter. Okay, so what is a qualifications review board? QRB is administered by the Office of Personnel Management. What it provides is a peer review, essentially, to decide who makes the cut in terms of being SES. And the idea behind being SES is that there are these people who have the golden ticket, essentially. They've been stamped. They have a stamp of approval that proves that they're a CEO, CFO, CIO type. You're the kind of person that can lead in multiple circumstances. Yes, you have an area of expertise, but fundamentally you're a leader. And so the idea is that 3 SES people are going to look at your application and decide, are you or are you not a leader? Those SES people are probably not going to be in the field where you are. So they could be from agriculture, State Department, wherever. They're going to be SESers from any other place in government. They've just volunteered to be on this board. They aren't rated or ranked. You just get like a yes or no of whether or not you're in or you're out. Sometimes they'll let you make a revision, but you have to pass the QRB in order to get the job. Any questions about that stage of it, the qualifications review board? Okay. Just along the way, in case you missed the introduction, you're welcome to ask questions in the question box and I will respond to them, but you are on mute. Okay, so are you SES ready? This is a big question for people. And you can see the number at the bottom here, text page 29. We have a great chapter written all about sort of deciding whether or not you're ready. But this is a really neat tool. I like it. It seems a little I don't know. It's a little complicated here, but let's break it down. Let's go over to the left side of the slide here where it says team manager and project manager. When you're working at that level, the kinds of things that you're really demonstrating are your ability to do team building, customer service. You have a lot of accountability, you influence, you negotiate. So that level we would call like managing projects. Supervisory level, now we're starting to deal with human capital problems, management. You leverage diversity to make sure the right people are in the right job. You deal with conflict, developing others, you solve problems. Then we go up to the next step here, which is manager. That's even a little bit different. Now we're not just managing budgets, but we're talking about like major financial management. You have to show a lot of creativity, political savvy, flexibility. And then the final level here in this staircase is external awareness, vision, strategic thinking, entrepreneurship, resilience, and decisiveness. This is what we call leading organizations. So this is essentially what the Office of Personnel Management, what Human Resources looks at when they determine whether or not you're executive material. They're kind of reading into what you've written, and in some cases reading directly to see, are you ready? Are you up at that step yet? Are you showing vision? Are you showing strategic thinking? So the idea is, for example, you are not just following other people's orders, but you're trying to think about what you want the future to be in your organization, and you're making big decisions to make that happen. So it's kind of a subtle thing, but vision and external awareness, all that stuff is what essentially they want the SES people to be able to do, is to lead a whole organization, not just manage a program. Now, the Career Development Program, the CDP, is essentially designed to help you get to that level. So just something to keep in mind, that you want to really be pursuing opportunities that let you demonstrate vision and strategic thinking, for example. So let's talk about the application. There are different SES application formats. You can see here there's traditional, resume-based, and accomplishment record type. And what you have here today is a resume-based application format, and we're also going to talk about agency-specific requirements, which you have in this case. The traditional executive application that I mentioned, we have an executive federal resume that's typically 4 to 5 pages long. So those of you who are planning to take this information and just go apply to some other SES job, just keep this in mind. We have a lot more information about it in the book. You can see there at page 69. So you want your resume to be about 4 to 5 pages long, not 20, not 15. I know some of you have 15-page resumes. Those days are over. The ECQs are going to be 10 pages long. Then those technical qualifications, those are something different. Sometimes they're just specified in the announcement. They're 1 page each. And in some cases, you're required to have a cover letter. So right there, we're looking at maybe 20 pages. That's the traditional format. The new executive application, which is required in this situation, is the executive federal resume. That's 4 to 5 pages long. It's going to include all of these executive core qualifications and everything in the text of the resume. I want to look at the book that you guys got a PDF of real quick to see what I'm talking about. So I'm going to move over to the book. I'm looking at the new SES application book, and I'm on page 116. So I'm on page 116 of the book. So this is Judy Johnson. And all of our case studies are real. Part of what we do at the Resume Place, in addition to doing a lot of training with individuals in agencies like yours, a big portion of our business is also direct services. We provide services to people who are interested in any kind of job, but especially federal. And I work with SES candidates all the time. All the samples in all of our books, and maybe you've seen some of our other books, they're all real. So this is a real person. So that's just something to keep in mind. So let's look at the resume. She has a little bit of an executive profile. That's nice when you have, 20 years experience behind you. You could add something like that. But then this is what I really want to show you. This is her most recent job. She's working as executive vice president. Okay, so this is a private industry person. And the first thing that we have is a kind of description of her duties. So right now, if you were to look at your resume, what you'd probably see is only this paragraph in your resume right now, the more generic type duty stuff. But actually, this is written really well. Implemented a strategic vision for business operations and development in the USA region of this international company with offices in 20 countries. Nice, nice. Indirectly supervise an office staff of 65 and sales force of 80, with dotted line supervision to 175 plant workers across 5 countries. Wow. You can see how much is already measurable right now in her resume. Now, you might not have these kind of numbers, that's fine, but any kind of numbers make something real. It makes it real. It's not enough in these resumes to say, responsible for business operations and development with offices in many countries. It's not enough. You want to say international companies, offices in 20 countries, strategic vision. These kind of things are what's going to make you score higher. So let's see here. She says, I manage cross-cultural issues. That's probably a big part of her job, I guess. Enforce EEO regulations and create programs to heighten morale and foster diversity. Look at that. She's got that word right there. And she manages a budget. So right here, this little paragraph is very hard hitting. So this, in a resume that's only 4 to 5 pages long, we have to have very hard hitting language in the what we would normally have as duties. And then right here, she has some key leadership initiatives. So the first one, now we put this in italics. She would probably take it out of the resume when she applied. In some cases, they ask for it, and in some cases, they specifically say, don't tell us what you're trying to address. But these little things here are her trying to address the ECQs. So right here, she has some short stories, like achieving a strategic plan. But here she has a longer story. Empowered and coached a diverse staff with low morale, gained trust and energized a very talented management team. And she goes all the way through to say, the HQ staff showed markedly improved morale and reduced turbulence. So all in here, these are all little stories. These are all stories. They're all specific things that she actually did. And she has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them in her first job here. And in the next job, she has 1, 2, 3 stories. And then the next job, she has 1, 2, 3, 4 stories. So she's coming up with these stories to bolster what she's done. Now, this job is $105,000 per year. So, okay, yep, she could use some leadership initiatives. Okay, I just want to show you that this is what it looks like. Now we have another sample here in the book. Let me see if I can find it. It is page, in the back of the book, we have a lot of case studies. So let me pull that up. Okay. This is her regular resume. And Keith Smith, he's the next one. So here's a before for Keith Smith. So we're now on, in the book, we're looking at page 161 in the book. So Keith Smith is a real person. Here's his before resume. He's working with the Department of Defense as an audit director. And see how he has these 4 little bullets? Okay. I want you to be honest. I want you to be honest right now. There's two kinds of federal resumes that we see all the time that our clients come to us with. They either have lots of little bullets or they have big blocks of text that, like, huge paragraphs that don't ever split up. Okay, which do you have? Do you have the laundry list with lots of little bullets, or do you have a big block of information that's impossible to read? Think about it. Look at your resume if you have it. The problem with this, can anybody tell me right now, we've just looked a little bit at that other resume. Why do you think this would not be as effective? Why doesn't this work for an executive SES level resume? Why doesn't this description work? And you guys can just write into the question box any ideas that you have. Why wouldn't this resume work for Keith Smith when you compare it to the resume we just looked at? Go ahead and type in your ideas in the question box. Andrew suggests that it doesn't fully paint the picture. Yeah, I think that's a really good way of putting it in terms of painting a picture. That's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to make it really real. Juan says it sounds like a job description. Oh my gosh, yes, you are so right. And actually, I had HR in a class that I taught recently. Where was I teaching that? I don't know. I don't know where I was. I might have been at Fort Bragg, but the HR person said, we have permission to throw away resumes that copy the position description word for word. Our leadership has told us we can just say that they're not qualified and just throw their resume out because they just are suspicious and they think, oh, this person's just like a lazy kind of like a cheater. If you copy your position description, you're in trouble. Okay, Mark says, this is not a personal story. It's just a listing. Yes, that's right. There's no personal story here. So let's say this person just decided to go ahead and use this resume. They didn't know. It said five pages. They said, okay, whatever. And Keith decided to use this to apply. He would never qualify because we don't see who he is in this story. In your resumes, I need to see who you are because they're like a legal document. They basically provide evidence so that, if somebody says, oh, well, why did Mark get the job and I didn't? We can point to the resume and say, see, this is why. So you're right, Mark, that it's not a personal story. And Kristen suggests that it doesn't show impact. Wow, that's a really good point as well. It says here, oversee the activities of 1,000 professional auditors. But what we don't see is like, why does that matter? What are we auditing? An audit director for the Department of the Army has awesome stories. I can tell you that because I actually just worked with somebody who was the audit director for Special Forces. I was teaching a class down at Special Forces. And I tell you what, when you run an audit on the US military, you see crazy stuff. You guys know what I'm talking about. You see all kinds of stuff. Money that is going where it shouldn't. Oh my gosh, big, huge amounts of money. And then a lot of times they're performing audits under huge pressure. Like if he had this job from 2004 to present, imagine that he was working in that same environment you guys are working in, that post-September 11 environment. There's a lot of pressure to do more with less after the war is getting drawn down. So anyway, all of that stuff, I know that because I've worked with folks who are in audits and are working for Army, but none of that is clear in this resume. And if he were to tell me that, then I would know that he's good with pressure and complexity, and it would give a lot of context. So I think you guys really hit the nail on the head in terms of diagnosing the problems with this particular resume. Let me fast forward here and let's see if we can find his after. Okay, so he made a top 10 list of accomplishments, which I'll talk to you about in a little bit here. But let's look, and then he made the CCAR. And so here is his after. So his after starts on what page am I on? 167. Okay, so here's his after. He has a little executive profile. That's nice. And so it says proactive senior leader with a proven record of accomplishments. Nice. So all of that is great. It's good for people who this profile can be good for people who have many years of experience and just want to kind of summarize it. So let's see here. Oversee the activities of 1,000 professional auditors to include Defense Contract Management Agency, Army Systems Command. Okay, Defense Contract Agency audits divided among 5 audit teams. Great. He delegated authority for program execution. Okay. Pointed the way for major financial management control changes to the program. Okay. Look at this. Oversees strategic planning and execution of difficult and complex audits of multi-million-dollar Department of Army geographically dispersed weapons system acquisition programs. What did I tell you? I knew his job was more complicated than what he made it sound like. I knew it. I mean, when you're auditing Army, that is complicated. Okay, so let's look at his accomplishments. Now we've really got it. Routinely appointed as the Acting Assistant Auditor General for Research, Development, Acquisition, and Logistics Directorate, a SES level position. Great. So yeah, a lot of people have like these acting things where they act as something or other while somebody's on maternity leave or whatever. You can put that in there as an accomplishment. Brief the Secretary of the Army. Okay, that's pretty important. Want to make sure that's in there. And then he's mentioning all the different types of people that he works with. That's great. So that he has that under leading people. Transformed use of earned value management within DoD and Department of Army. Led a large, highly complex audit that was requested by the Assistant Secretary of the Army to determine what changes were needed to reinvigorate the EVM program and use it effectively across all DoD acquisition programs to achieve its strategic goal of providing affordable weapons systems to sailors and Marines. I'm going to stop right there. See this? Providing affordable weapons systems to sailors and Marines. So today I saw Diana in person and I went over to TSA headquarters and I had real people in class and Mark says, now I feel like I cannot compete with this resume. Oh no, don't feel like that. No, but this guy's kind of important, right? With 7,700 SESers, they can't all be this guy. And man, boy, audits. So one thing that I was saying when I was in your class today, when I was talking to your colleagues, was that everybody in the class kind of forgot about how front-facing TSA is. And I often work with people who work in agencies who have no relationship with the voters, for example, with the people who pay for their agency. So you guys, with being at TSA, you have lots of opportunities to tell stories that have nouns in them, like weapon systems, sailors, and Marines. You guys have, what did I hear today? I heard stories about canine dogs, planes, drugs, boats, terrorists. You want to make sure that you're including that stuff like this guy is to make it real. Because I tell you what, there's hardly anybody in the world that hears audit and thinks, interesting. But ultimately, the mission behind what an auditor is doing is right here. He writes it out for us, providing affordable weapon systems to sailors and Marines. And that's what you guys are doing in your jobs, is you're trying to protect us from terrorism, make it easier to fly, make whatever it is you're doing. So just try to think about that. But I just wanted to show you this particular resume and the language, the outline, the format, the everything in all of our samples. We want you to just, use them as templates when you go and create your resume. So let's talk about how you do that, Mark, so that you don't feel like you got to compete with this guy. That guy's already got a job. Don't worry. Okay. So let's start here. We're going to talk about what are these ECQs. Okay. If I can start my slideshow. So what are these ECQs I keep mentioning? They are basically executive level knowledge, skills, and abilities, or KSA statements. You might have written them in the past. They're like little essays that you would have had to do in the past. But they're more complex at this level. They reflect 28 different leadership competencies. That's a lot. There's 28 different leadership competencies or behaviors that OPM has determined are critical for good performance in the executive level position. This is not at all like private industry, right? This is very formulaic in a way, the things that they want you to prove and to show in your ECQs. So they're asking you to really jump through a kind of some complicated hoops here. But I'm going to give you some insights into how to address these ECQs and what they mean. And I hope that you'll take a look at the book as well, and I'll go back and show it to you. You see here the text pages in the bottom, like page 71. The book has some really good examples to show you how to begin this writing. So let's look at what are the 5 ECQs. The first ECQ is leading change. Leading change. Very, very important. The second ECQ is leading people. The third thing you have to show is your ability to be results driven. You're driven to find results. Then number 4 is business acumen. And this is actually number 5. I don't know why it says number 3. Number 5 is building coalitions. So let's look at them one by one. Here's leading change. This is the first ECQ. It's really, really important. The ability to create and manage multi-agency changes and innovation, which meet the goals, priorities, and values of the organization. Responding to pressure, being flexible under changing conditions, and having strategic vision. Why do you think it's so important within the federal government for them to have leaders who are good at leading change? Why is leading change so important? See if you can write your ideas in the question box. Tell me, why do you think leading change is so important? Anybody have any ideas? All your ideas seem too obvious, I know. But Deirdre's got it. Because change is constant, she says. Yes, thank you. That's right. Agencies have to be ready, she says, for changes that occur in policies and procedures, etc. Absolutely. Change in the federal government is constant. It's, it's not like private industry where, okay, we're using a vacuum cleaner one day and the next day we've got little robots cleaning our thing. And that's how it goes. We'll change the company, whatever. We'll make a new widget. In government, we don't get to change everything. We don't get to change the Department of State. We've had a Department of State for a really long time. Right? We don't get to shut it down and start over again. We just have to go with the punches, change with the conditions. Now, once in a while, we do start new agencies like Homeland Security, right? And TSA. You guys should all have awesome leading change stories because your agency is so much about change. Yes, and Juan says that right here. It says one thing that's constant is change. Absolutely. We're in an ever-changing agency. You guys are totally in a changing agency because you respond to emergent problems. So whatever the thing is, like the underwear guy, the shoe bomber guy, the toothpaste thing, whatever the new thing is, that you guys hear in the chatter or, the intel people hear in the chatter and you guys have to make it real into policy, that's leading change. And I heard a lot of stories today about leading change. The redress system, that was one story that I heard today so that people could, enter their name and say, okay, well, my name sounds like a terrorist, someone on the terrorist watch list. So that redress system was a big change based on trying to meet customer needs. Let's look at the next slide. Here's a tip about leading change. One thing that we really like when you're writing accomplishments about leading change is to make sure that you're describing your accomplishment in the context of something really big and with a clear direction for where to go next. So we love before and after facts. So I want you to think about something that you've done in your career where you faced a change, or you led a program or a solution or created a problem in the midst of a change. Now, if you started at the beginning with TSA, then you might have lots of stories about that. But also, what I heard today, I asked, who was it, Deborah? I asked Deborah, why is it that the redress system didn't exist right away? Why couldn't people say, oh, well, my name's the same as a terrorist, please don't, tag me or flag me at security? Well, she said that it did exist, but it wasn't as much of a priority. And the priority of the TSA agency changed. So in the beginning, TSA was focused only on security, really. And then you started to become more focused on customer service, right? That was a change that happened organizationally. You have a lot of changes that went on with your organization in terms of its history, but also technologically, 5 years ago, where were we on the internet? 10 years ago. So you have a lot of different changes. So I want you guys to think, if you can, for a couple minutes here about an accomplishment that you achieved in the context of a big change. What's something that you did in the midst of or in order to address a change? And see if you can write about that in the question box. And maybe I could hear a couple of examples of something that you did somehow that you led change. Let me go back to the other slide so we can look at that. That's the other slide. What is leading change? Let's look at it again. Create and manage multi-agency changes and innovation, which meet the goals, priorities, and values of the organization. Responding to pressure, yep. Being flexible, yep. And having strategic vision. So I'd like to hear from you. If you could just go ahead and write in the question box, what is an accomplishment that you've achieved while leading change? How have you led change? Anybody want to tell me about a change that you did? Okay, here's one from Ryan. Establish the process to criminally prosecute captured detainees while in Iraq. All right. That's a great little story there. You established the process to criminally prosecute captured detainees while in Iraq. So I would say that that meets the challenge of being flexible under changing conditions. You also were responding to pressure, absolutely. I'm sure there was a lot of political pressure in this case to create a solution quickly. Ryan, what was the hardest part from your perspective? What was the hardest part, the biggest challenge about establishing this process? What was the biggest challenge from your perspective? Okay, Ryan says the biggest challenge for him was getting buy-in from all the outside groups. Absolutely. Absolutely. Getting buy-in is a really, really big part of responding to pressure and leading change, definitely. And don't underestimate that. If you believe in your heart that that was the hardest part about it, you really want to think about, what does that mean? If I'm trying to get buy-in, what am I really doing? He had to get buy-in, he says, from State Department, the Department of Defense, Iraqis, etc. Yeah, that's a really good story. So always ask yourself that question. What was the hardest part about it? Another question you might ask yourself is, why didn't it happen before? Why didn't it happen before? So maybe it's a brand new problem, or maybe the person who had the job before you wasn't very good at his job. You never know. Maybe the technology didn't exist. But always ask yourself, what was the hardest part? Why didn't it happen before? Let's look at thanks, Ryan. Let's look at the next one, leading people. Leading people is the commitment to continuing professional development, the need to bring people along to ensure performance. The best tips that I can give you for leading people are to make sure that you're highlighting your experience with diversity, developing others, and resolving conflict. Those are the hottest components right now of leading people, which is just essentially about leading individuals in a managerial sense. But diversity, and I mean diversity not just of ethnicity, but also of age, also of education level. Diversity is very, very important. Developing others, that is like providing educational opportunities for you. So Diana is showing her capacity to develop others by creating the opportunity for you guys to get training. That's developing others. So if you're giving your staff the chance to go out to a conference or whatever, you're developing others. Or if you're mentoring people, resolving conflict, that's also a big one right now. Let's look at the next one. So ECQ3 is results driven. I really like results driven. Results driven is all about instituting continuous process improvements so that any systems established give feedback, regular monitoring, and the ability to identify deficiencies and mechanisms for modification. Results driven is a systems accomplishment. So you looked at a problem and you addressed it in a systematic way. So you improved the number of people who are moving through a TSA checkpoint. You improved the morale by creating a continuous system where people can check in with whatever. So it's not just a one-time gig, is my point here. Results driven is all about creating a process improvement. So let's look at that a little more in depth here with my tips. We want to make sure that we have quantifiable results. So results driven, it tends to be a real numbers one. So it's about getting the number of cases down. It's about how much money you saved. It's about seeing why is it taking so long for us to move this piece of paper from the person who files the complaint up to the people who can do something about it. Why does this piece of paper take 3 weeks to get from place A to place C? But this is a problem we see in government all the time. Well, the paper has to sit on the accounting person's desk. Then it has to sit on this other person's desk. Okay, so you want to think about how you address that problem by saying, you know what? And I had a story like this. The lady said, instead of sending it through the mail, I walked over to each person's desk and had them like sign off on the document. She had to walk through the building and have everyone sign off on the document in person. That was a process improvement that saved everyone 3 weeks. So you want to think about scenarios like that where improving results is going to be critical to the mission. So in that case, I don't remember what I think maybe it was travel vouchers or something. But anyway, when you're saving time, you're saving money. When you're using less people to do something, you're really going to improve the bottom line, improve your mission. So that's results driven. Number 4 is business acumen. This is among the most straightforward of the ECQs. This focuses on business stuff, which is how you acquire and manage people, procedures, financial resources, IT, and there's 3 parts to business acumen: finances, human capital, and technology. And all 3 have to be addressed in this ECQ. They don't all have to be addressed at once. So you'll see in the 5-page resume format that people address business acumen in 2 or 3 different little stories. One might be about finances, the other about capital, and another one about technology. That's okay too. They don't all have to be one story, but you do have to make sure that you address all 3 of those. So I mentioned that here in the tips. Another point is that recruitment is also really important. That's a big part of personnel management. So that part about personnel is OPM is really looking for creative management, like detail assignments, it says here, for temporary employees, acting under tight deadlines, that kind of thing. So doing more with less just generally is what we might also call creative management, where you hired an intern because you didn't have any more money for such and such a project, or you made sure that somebody, was able to do something on a temporary basis, on a detail assignment, in order not to have to spend the entire salary or whatever. So improving results with less money is always great too for business acumen. And the last ECQ is building coalitions. Building coalitions is the ability to bring internal and external stakeholders together, negotiate for win-win solutions, communicate clearly, and then create and execute complex strategies to meet the needs of multiple organizations. So one of the tips that we have here for building coalitions is you need to make sure that the readers get the fact that you're working out all this stuff at really senior levels in the organization. So building coalitions isn't like, oh, I created a coffee hour where everybody is talking to each other. In most cases, creating an every Friday lunch isn't going to be working out program issues at senior levels. In some cases, it is. If we're talking about people who have divisive relationships, like I'm sure if Ryan was able to get his Iraqi DoD State Department people together for a lunch to talk about something, that in his scenario might have been working out a program issues, the detaining of Iraqis at a senior level. Whatever it is that you are going to say is the coalition you built, you really want to make it clear that it was working out a big problem or like a top level problem, let's say. Or even if it was like improving morale, let's say you did create a coffee hour every Friday, everybody comes for coffee and cookies. Why is it that morale was so important in your organization? Why is it that everyone, even at the senior levels, were desperate to get morale higher, right? So whatever your story is, even if it's something as small as, let's say, a coffee hour, you want to make sure that you're making it clear in what way it clearly was working at a senior level. Also, we love coalitions that stand the test of time. So we love long-lasting or long-term relationships. So you built a relationship that even after you left that job, DOD and TSA are still talking to each other. TSA has a lot of coalition examples because you guys work with many different agencies. So maybe you guys could just tell me right now in the question box, you could tell me who are the different stakeholders, we call them, who you work with. Who do you work with on a daily basis or weekly or yearly basis? Are we talking about DOD, State Department, local law enforcement, citizens? Who are your stakeholders? Who do you have coalitions with right now? Let me hear from you in the question box. Who do you have coalitions with right now? It could be different agencies, different branches of the military, maybe. Let me hear from you. Who are your coalitions? Who are you working with? Okay, Andrew says he's working with airlines, airports, shipping companies, and LEOs. Awesome. Yeah. Kristen is working with other components of DHS. Definitely. Juan is working with air carriers, the airport authority, the police department. Definitely. Anybody else? Who are you working with? All of the things that you've named so far need to be named in your resume. You want to say that you're working with air carriers, airports, police department. Mark mentions that he's been able to build a coalition with airport management, local LEOs, and Border Patrol for checkpoint coverage. Awesome. So you built a coalition with Border Patrol and all those different folks in order to get checkpoint coverage. Definitely. That's great, Mark. So you want to mention all of those names. I'm sure you're getting the point now that in your resume, it's not enough to say, work with diverse stakeholders. This kind of stuff, all that generic stuff, it's got to be gone. We got to get rid of it. We need to put in the really specific stuff that says that you're, building a coalition for checkpoint coverage. Now, the next question for Mark then would be, why was that important? Why is that coalition necessary and important, and why hadn't it happened before? So a lot of the answers for these might be, well, it wasn't necessary before, or something else. Mark, you can tell us if you want why this coalition was necessary and why it hadn't happened before. Always ask yourself that question. Why hadn't it happened before? Okay. So underlying all of these competencies that I just talked about are these fundamental competencies that need to be also somehow written into your resume. That includes interpersonal skills, oral communication, integrity and honesty. We love that. Written communication, continual learning, and having a public service motivation. So you guys have nailed public service motivation being at TSA, because so much of what you guys do is to serve the public, and it's clear that you serve the public. So Mark has checked in with us, and he says that the armed presence for the officers was not able to be provided by the locals, and Border Patrol was able to supply the full-time employees, he says. Okay, great. So Mark, that is an example of creative management, because you couldn't find locals. The locals didn't have the funding to go ahead and do that. So you went ahead and found the full-time employees from Border Patrol. So that's a great story for building a coalition, but that's also a really good story for the leading people, or even the I would say even the business acumen, where we get to personnel management. That would be a good part in there too. Mark says he's a slow typist. No worries. Luckily, that's not a fundamental competency here. We have interpersonal skills, oral communication. So all of these, you just want to keep as kind of a checklist. Keep it in the back of your mind when you're submitting your resume. Did I hit integrity? Did I hit communication? Just, in a word or two. Okay. After that, we have the technical qualifications. In your case, you don't have a lot of TQs to integrate into your resumes here, so you don't need to worry too much about it in this case. You do have to address it in one small way, and let me show you how. I'm going to go on to USA Jobs here. I've pulled up your announcement, so now I'm on USA Jobs, and so this is the announcement for the CDP. You can see here the deadline is next Monday. It says here many vacancies available, and let's scroll down here. This is all the stuff I told you that they promised they will give you. This is what I mentioned, 1 year of supervisory experience. They really mean that, 1 year equivalent to GS 15. Look, it says supervisory experience includes planning, assigning, and evaluating the work of subordinate employees. Well, it defines it for you. Planning, directing, difficulty, responsibility, national significance. See all these words? We're going to try and get them in your resumes. Okay, so let's go down a little bit more. Aha, here it is, technical qualifications. So you have to meet the technical qualifications for each position, but that just says that you have to identify one basically at this point. You're basically just identifying your what category you're in. And then I just want to make sure that you know that you have to do that. So you're going to decide, am I in a core occupation or support? And I think most of you guys are either in core or support. A lot of support folks, right? Because most of you guys are in program and policy, like the 300. If you're in the 300 family, my 0301, 0343, 0340, you're basically in support occupations. So in this case, it's not really going to affect your resume. You just want to make sure that somewhere in there you have those words. If you select that you're in this category because of policy and planning, you want to make sure that you have the words policy and planning in your resume. Okay, that's the only way we're going to address TQs in this case. Okay, so in a traditional case, they could be written as a standalone essay, but in this case, we're just integrating it, and it's not even really clear that there is a tech qual because you're applying to a generic program, so that's why it's not really part of this story. So how do we build these ECQs? There is a required format, and it's called the CCAR writing model. And it's challenge, context, action, and results. And it's kind of a straightforward storytelling model. So you start with the challenge where you would describe a specific problem or goal, and then the context. So those are the individual or the groups that you worked with. And then the action. So what actions did you take? And that's usually like verbs. First I did this, then I did that. And then results. And you guys, I know you have a handle on results. You already know we love metrics, we love mission, we love anything that involves the citizens of America, because that's just very clarifying about what are you really doing? You know, why are we paying everyone salaries? You know, you want to get that stuff into the results that you're really contributing to mission. So challenge, context, action, and results. So how do we get those all in here? Let me look at the book. Let's go back to the book for a second here. So Keith went ahead and did that, and he wrote his accomplishments out into CCAR. So let's look at the first one, Acting Assistant Auditor General. So he wrote, the challenge is, and let's see what page I'm on here, 165. The challenge is, I led a strategic planning and execution of difficult and complex audits, geographically dispersed. Remember, we were talking about that, how I liked that. Geographically dispersed weapon systems, nice, nice. Navigating challenging agency and contractor resistance, see that? So he's setting up the challenge. He's answering the question, what was hard about it? Very often at the resume place, and we help lots of people at different levels in the federal government, people will come to us and say, Emily, I applied for a job, I got qualified but not best qualified, or I got well qualified but not best qualified, or even my resume was rated best qualified but I wasn't interviewed. Usually the problem with people who are in the right ballpark but aren't rising to the top, the problem usually is that they're not speaking enough in their resume to the challenge. Challenge is where you show complexity, and complexity and scope is what makes resumes score higher. So people who want to make a change from a 15 to an SES, an 11 to a 12, 12 to a 13, whatever level it is, you have to really talk about complexity. So the next one, context. As audit director with oversight leadership for 1,000 professional auditors, I was routinely appointed as, so he's saying a little bit about where he was when it happened, great. Action, I briefed the Army Secretary, great. Briefing is a great verb. As a result, I led my staff in producing numerous organizational improvements. So that's a pretty simple CCAR. Let's look at the next one. I faced transformed earned value management in DoD, leading change. This is great. His challenge was, I faced furious opposition from the government and contractor personnel regarding required changes for the EVM. Now, you can't raise your hand because I can't really see you, but you can do it at home. Raise your hand if you've ever faced furious opposition. I'll bet some of you are raising your hands. There's some furious opposition in this world. And whenever there is, we really want to hear about it because that shows that you can deal with pressure. So that's a great challenge. That's just showing the complexity of what he did. He led a highly complex audit that was requested by the Assistant Secretary of Army, determined what changes were needed, okay? And this is the one that we read before, so we're familiar with this story. But you can see now he's putting it in this context, or challenge, context, action, result. Either way is fine. So the result was that it transformed the use of earned value management within DoD. And remember that this ensured that soldiers and sailors received affordable, timely weapon systems. Because I have to say, as a civilian walking in the street, EVM and DoD at DOA doesn't really mean much, right? I mean, if you're like a regular person, what is that? So it's great that he, wrote it here. Soldiers and sailors received weapons. So remember that we want to include some plain language in our stories because the people who are on your OPM review board are not necessarily experts in what you do. I guarantee you they're not. They're going to be experts in whatever they're experts in. They're just SES, and that's why they're reviewing your application. So that's the CCAR model. So how do we write these little stories? Now, I've just shown you a few of them. We want to show personal leadership, so not just participation. So it's not enough to say participated in. We use I occasionally. You'll see that in the samples in the book. just to show your contributions. When you're writing these stories, it can get kind of complicated if you're only using like generic verbs and never using I. It's kind of hard to follow. So we use I every now and then. I did this, I did that. We keep our examples recent within the last 5 to 10 years. 5 to 10 years. Now, if you did something super great, like, I don't know, saved the president's life or something, 20 years ago, we'll put that in there. It doesn't even have to be that great. But if you did something really good 15 years ago, we'll include it. But they really want to see 5 to 10 years. I know that's a challenge for some people. We use specific examples. You guys have seen that already. We use specific examples. We also follow the CCAR model. So challenge, context, action, and results. That's how these little stories are written. This is true for the long ECQs and the resume, the 5-page resume that we're working on. So we want to avoid generalities or vague references and manage a staff of 18 supporting policy development. Now that's like not even that bad. Sometimes it's worse. Responsible for management of staff of, right? How passive can we write it? Now we're going to clarify it. Lead office with 18 senior interagency personnel detailed from 6 different agencies. Guide staff. I guide staff in policy development and planning to improve the sharing and dissemination of information across the government for national security. See, we threw that in there so we know what the mission of this person's work is. Because, once we're dealing with the cream of the crop here, the highest, SES jobs are the highest level jobs that aren't appointed. So these are really, really high level jobs. And I know for you guys, they seem so near that you don't even think about it anymore. But from a lowly civilian position, these are really, really important jobs. What you do is you're responsible for a lot of money, a lot of mission that means a lot to a lot of people. You really want to make it clear why. That so what factor is pretty big in ECQs. The next thing we look at is showing a measurable results. You guys have seen that already in a lot of samples that I've shown you. Improving customer service, increasing efficiency, productivity, money saved. So we don't talk in government really about making money, right? We talk about saving money. There are a few agencies in government that make money. Let's see, Park Service. They make some money when people come in through the door, but they're not running at a profit or anything. But most people aren't developing products, they're saving money. So you always want to talk about money saved and qualify and quantify anything. If you don't have a number, that's okay. Just make sure that you have a descriptive word. Like you saw that we've dropped the word complex a couple of times. Yes, that's what you want to do. You want to just make sure that that word is in there, because unless you tell us it's complex, how do I know? I mean, I don't. So you got to make it crystal clear for OPM. Show diversity accomplishments. Yes, I've said it again. Diversity is big. Writing the ECQs, you want to focus on recent experience, education, and training. Definitely all of those things are relevant. Okay. So this is a mapping exercise, and I'm not with you today, so I can't force you to do it. But what you will do when you reach out for help, so you guys are all entitled to one-on-one consultative support following this webinar. And one of the things that I'll ask you to do as your homework is to create a top 10 list of your career accomplishments. Some of you might have already written your ECQs in the past. Maybe you have your 10 accomplishments written already, but I want you to make just a short list of your top 10 career accomplishments, because what I need to do as your consultant and what you guys need to do moving forward is to map those accomplishments against these ECQs. So this comes from the book on pages 65 to 67. And essentially what we do is we take your top 10 accomplishments and we label them in here. We have 2 for each. So let's see what I've heard today. Mark's story about building the coalition in order to have a checkpoint. Remember, I mentioned that I think that certainly is building coalition. So let's look at the keywords under coalition. Internal, joint, interagency, other federal agencies. See, all those words are relevant. Partner, develop, common goal, alliance, See all those words? Those are all really, really relevant to the story that Mark told us. But I also thought it would go well under the business acumen and workforce and staffing needs. See how in there there's workforce and staffing in business acumen? Business acumen has a big workforce, staffing, organizational goals, recruit, select. So Mark had mentioned that he was, coming up with that coalition in order to meet some needs in terms of staffing. Ryan's story was to establish the process to criminally prosecute captured detainees in Iraq. And that's definitely, I think, leading change. Implementing a vision, having creativity, new or cutting edge programs or processes. External awareness, that's a really big one. Having to deal with, what is the situation on the ground? How do we move forward given that situation? Obstacles, unexpected, pressure, adversity. I mean, I'm reading all that into the little 5 words that Ryan told me, so it may not be leading change, because when I asked him what was the hardest part about it, he said getting buy-in from all the outside groups was the hardest part. So, what would be the best what do you think would be the best ECQ to demonstrate your ability to get buy-in? What's the buy-in ECQ? Where do we show that we can negotiate with others and get everybody on the same page, present, we're doing our sales pitch, right? Oh, somebody told a good story in class today about sales, trying to get the Coast Guard to agree to provide the paperwork that was necessary in order to continue a relationship with them. They had to convince them to do it. They have to do a sales pitch. What do you think is the best ECQ for that? Okay, everybody says, okay, Andrew says building coalitions. Yes. Ryan says building coalitions. Juan thinks building coalitions. Yes. Partnering and developing networks. Yes. Those are the words he pointed out. Yep. Deidre also says building coalitions. I think so. I think so. I think that buy-in thing is very much about building coalitions. You guys have so many coalitions. You are so ready to go on this. I just think TSA is such a great agency to work in if you want to move into SES, because you have fabulous stories. You're really dealing with so many different agencies, which is, for a lot of people who come to me for help, they've never worked with other agencies the way you guys have. You work with public, private, airports, different states, different whatever. I mean, some people just sit in their room and, talk to the other cubicles. So you guys have some great stories. Okay, so in looking at the mapping exercise here, just let's take a second right now. I want you to read these and kind of look at them. Can you, and from what I've said so far, can any of you tell me right now, like, what have you diagnosed as maybe, okay, I might need to work on that one. I might not have an example of, for example, leading people, or I might need to work on my examples for business acumen. Can any of you see right now where you might have a gap that we need to address? Like if you think about your accomplishments. Where's the gap in your own career or experience right now, or even just maybe your resume? Where's the gap? What are you missing? Yeah, one suggestion is business acumen, definitely. And Brian's wondering how anybody else ever got certified. I know. I mean, this is such a complex thing. It's it's really a challenge. I know. Business acumen. Well, it would be good to ask them how they got certified. Business acumen is probably the number one thing that people tell me is going to be a challenge for them, because there's so many different parts of it, and then a lot of people don't have one or the other, whether it's the financial thing or human capital or whatever. We're looking at the differences. Mark is wondering about the differences between leading change and leading people. And here they seem really the same. Yeah, let's take a look at that. Leading people is much more about personnel. So there is a lot of vision, mission, goals. You're right. They are similar, but leading people is going to be more about how did you take your team there. So it could be in the context of leading a change, or it could be in the context of just, doing more with less money, or just trying to meet your mission. But leading people is much more about basically being a boss of individuals, as opposed to this leading change is really multifaceted. That's going to have people involved, systems involved, technology involved, all kinds of different things are going to happen with leading change. With leading people, we're going to be talking more about, like here it says, team building inspires, team commitments, spirit, pride, cooperation, group goals. Let's see if we can find some examples. Oops. Let's see here. We don't have a table of contents. Okay, let's see here. Leading people, leading change, business acumen, building coalitions. Let's see his leading people examples. So the first one was leading people, but that's really just kind of a brief one where he's mentioning how many different kinds of people he supervises. Let's see if he has another leading people story that's better. Leading change, results driven. Okay, here's a leading people story. Let's read it. Reversed internal conflict, and I'm in the book on page 170 if you want to just make a note for later. Reversed internal conflict, poor morale, and low productivity of an audit team requested to conduct a politically sensitive audit for the Criminal Investigation Service with DoD-wide implications. So this could be an example of leading change, but for leading people, what he's going to focus on is the people component of it. So there was a conflict and morale problem. I took charge of the team, introduced training and audit execution strategies, and refocused on the audit on addressing potential fraud issues. I divided the group into teams with a focus on the specific areas addressing vulnerabilities and risks affecting the potential fraud indicators. These efforts greatly improved the team's level of expertise of specialized auditing functions, allowing the team to be responsive to leadership in managing a high-risk area by providing audit services of recognizable value. The audit team identified a security vulnerability involving contractor employees accessing restricted and controlled areas on Air Force, Army, Navy, and Marine Corps installations. Oh my Lord, that's pretty relevant, isn't it, these days? That's a good story. The report went to Chief of Army Operations Security Office. The Army took immediate action to address the risks affecting national security. We love to talk about national security because it's real. Team members received special awards for outstanding performance. That's a good turnaround. And the turnaround in this case, although it is essentially leading a change as well, in this case, he's talking about the people component of it. So we have here morale and productivity, team training strategies, teams again, groups. I'm just looking at the keywords to me that are like sort of level of expertise. I think that's a team word. Responsive to leadership, managing, team again. So this is more about talking about how we address the problems of the individual. So Juan has a question. When writing the ECQs, does each element within the ECQ need to be addressed? Well, so let's see. So you mean, do all the keywords need to be addressed? No, not necessarily every single keyword. So like if we go back to the slides and see how there's so much in here, there's so many different words, I would say that you probably want to use 50% of these words. Think about using 50% of these words. Okay? Think about using 45% of these words. And leading people, definitely think about using 50% of the words, except for diversity, which you have to use 100%. You have to make sure that word's in there. Results driven. Every story doesn't have to hit every aspect of it. That's why traditionally you have 2 examples for every ECQ. So in the resume format, where we have a 5-page resume, you'll see in the samples that sometimes people have 3 stories for results driven. That's okay. And each one of them identifies kind of a different aspect of it. Or like business acumen, which clearly has 3 prongs, which is personnel, budget, and IT. You might have 3 different stories about that. That's okay. So that's why traditionally there's 10 examples, and we ask for a top 10 list of accomplishments. And we kind of work off the idea one that within 2 stories, you should have addressed most of these words or, concepts more broadly. I hope that answers your question. So Mark has a question. Start with leading change and lead into leading the people through it. Well, not exactly. Oops, I keep hitting that button. We don't need to start with leading change necessarily. Just in this case, it turned out to be a leading change story. Let's go back to what's her name? Judy. She was on page 116, I think. Let's look at that and see if she has any good examples. Oh, wait, we have some examples here, don't we? Well, let's look at hers. Here we go, Judy. So her examples in her resume are, in some cases, a little bit shorter. Okay, so here's her leading people story on page 116. Empowered and coached a diverse staff with low morale, another morale story, gained trust and energized a very talented management team to exceed their potential. Led a headquarters staff in Long Beach composed of personnel from 2 regions, the headquarters, and members from 2 countries. This comprised the management team and mid-level staff. The management team handled their direct reports in a very hierarchical, depreciative manner that resulted in many complaints and turbulence in personnel. Rollover or whatever, turnover is always a problem. To establish the new leadership team, I scheduled an off-site meeting, directed that the meeting be prepared and conducted by the new leadership team, who presented their proposals. This successful meeting institutionalized the new leadership construct, and I achieved a culture of inclusion, empowerment, and teamwork. So the HQ staff showed markedly improved morale and reduced personnel turbulence. So there's another example of leading people. So I guess it does have a component of change as well, but mostly leading people is just about dealing with the individuals themselves. Hope that answers your question as well. Here's another leading people. Successfully redeployed key managers via intensive personal networking, as well as coaching, mentoring, and exposure via delegating direct responsibility for projects. Coaching and mentoring is a big part of developing others. So we love that, coaching and mentoring. Anytime you can get that in there, hopefully that's, you've hired an intern or a volunteer or something like that. Or just, when new people come in. Okay. So the resume-based application has to really show all of that in the resume. So we've mentioned that. In the case of the 5-page resume and the ECQ separately, the ECQs are judged kind of just separately on their own, but at the resume they're integrated. And then you'll have an interview. So it has to include, just as a review, it has to include these mini CCAR stories, like I told you, with kind of a before and after. You see, not every example in like Judy's resume is long. Some of them are longer than others. She had that one really short story that we just read that was like 1 line long, and probably she only wrote that to hit that mentoring thing. So that kind of goes to Juan's question as well. She probably didn't have mentoring, and the other leading people story she had was about morale. Nowhere in there was it about mentoring or developing others. So she has another little story to hit that one. That's okay. That's why we work with about 10, that top 10 idea, but 10, 12 maybe little stories. You're going to identify each bullet in the resume by showing, okay, this is to meet ECQ, whatever, leading people or results driven, but then you remove that before you submit the resume. I don't know why. OPM makes the rules that we have to put these things in the resume, but we can't be as bold as to label what we've done. I really don't know why. These are all just, these are all challenges of the system here. Include all of the federal elements found in the executive federal resume. So everything's the same as in your traditional like federal resume, where we need to have your supervisor's name, the month that you started the job. The resumes in the book are meant to be templates for you. So if you don't have a resume right now, you can start building one using the resumes in the book. And then, when we talk to you, if you ask for some one-on-one support, which I hope that you'll do, whether it's just a resume review or whatever, we will go ahead and try and make that resume a little bit longer, so then we'll have something to work with when you come to us. Okay, so this is the rating scale. Remember, I've been talking to you about getting to the top, bottom, middle. This is how OPM does it. So in some cases, they call this, when you're applying to a regular job, it's not SES, they'll say qualified, well qualified, best qualified, like that. So the bottom group, in this case, they call it bottom group. The experience is limited and narrow in scope and complexity, and it shows limited mastery of ECQs and technical competencies. So I mentioned this a couple times, scope and complexity is very important. So even if that means just using the word complex once in a while, you guys get what I'm talking about right now. You get what I'm saying about scope. I want to know that you're working with this agency and that agency, because it's all just making your job bigger. It's showing what's big about your job. Middle group. The middle group is identified by having limited experience, okay, in scope and complexity, and the quality and depth of experiences at an executive level. So you have partial mastery of ECQs and some technical competencies if they're applicable. And then the top group is that you have a lot of experience based on scope, complexity, quality, and depth. So quality and depth, that's why we move away from the generic language. You really cannot demonstrate scope, complexity, quality, and depth with generic language that says responsible for and duties include. It just won't work. It won't get you to the top group. So full mastery of ECQs and technical competencies if applicable. Now you're applying to a CDP in this case, so you're kind of graded on a curve. They don't really expect you to be in the top group. I mean, you're not applying for an SES job right now. You're applying for a candidate development program, so they expect you to be kind of in between this top group and middle group. You're right in there. You might need a couple more opportunities to just nail it, to hit it out of the park. That's why they're gonna send you, somewhere else. They're gonna spend 18 months working with you, creating a plan. You're gonna get certified by the end of that. But if you're taking this stuff that we've talked about today to apply to an SES job and not the CDP, or at some point in your career, you really have to hit all ECQs. They have to be in there. You have to nail them all. So just keep that in mind. So I did mention this right at the okay, Mark is leaving. That's okay, no problem. Thanks, Mark. So I did mention this right at the beginning. 2 assessors are going to read and categorize the resume, and then they're going to make notes. They make notes by each ECQ, and they indicate what the person did and what the outcome was. They actually read for that. So that's why we do CCAR. And then they're going to determine your potential for success. So here's our final points. These are the lessons learned from QRB letters, because when you apply, lots of times they tell you what you did wrong. So this comes from the Office of Personnel Management. These are the top 10 reasons that people are not approved in the qualification review board. Number 1, the person didn't describe what they did individually to achieve results. So personally, individually, they didn't say it was all team and we and task force and whatever. You have to say what you did. Emphasis on technical rather than leadership skills. So, leave that technical knowledge a little bit in the background on this resume. It's focusing more on that leadership stuff that's more transferable. Number 3, emphasis on process rather than results. We love results. Number 4, didn't use CCAR model. It's totally required. So some type of storytelling method where you're really clearly saying the action and the results and all that. Another reason why people are disapproved, no evidence of leveraging diversity. I told you that's a big one. Man, that's big. Diversity. You got to have that in there. So, all kinds of diversity, but make sure it's in there. No evidence of strategic thinking or vision. Ooh, that's not good. So remember, we talked about that right from the beginning. You really want to show the big picture, how you're participating in the bigger questions of the organization. And I think at TSA, you all will have that nailed because there's so much vision required in an agency that's new. You have to imagine everything. You have to say, well, what will airports look like in the future? A lot of vision involved in that. A lot of vision in saying, well, how could we get passengers from A to B safely? You're going to create something new. So I think you guys are all going to really nail that. 7, vague statements or philosophy rather than facts. We don't really want to hear what you believe about management. We want to see it. 8, no evidence of innovation and creativity. And again, I think you guys won't have a problem with that. Number 9, a lot of people write just a laundry list of actions without context or results. Now, I know you won't make that mistake because I just taught you CCAR. No laundry lists. And number 10, a lot of people get disapproved because they just don't have any measurable results. You want to have some, even qualitative ones. Remember, if you can't do quantitative, then you want qualitative, like better, worse, improved, safer, that kind of thing. Okay, so that is a quick 90 minutes. And sometimes I spend days with people doing this. Quick 90 minutes on how to apply with a 5-page SES resume. Are there any questions right now for me? Or if you have questions for Diana. Andrew is wondering, Diana, if they should email me to set up a one-on-one meeting, and why don't I unmute you so you can address how they could go about setting up a one-on-one meeting. Go ahead.
Yes, Emily and folks out there, you have a number to call the Career Coaching Service. So call that number. It was in the announcement that went out about these face-to-face and the webinars, training sessions. Call that number and please indicate when you call that you want an executive coach to work with you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Diana. So that should answer your question, Andrew. Okay, Juan says, this was excellent. Thanks for your time. You're welcome. So really, it's my pleasure. I'm really excited to help Diana and help everybody get together and create, more SESers who come from TSA. I'm really thrilled to be able to do it. So unless, Diana, do you have any final things that you want to say?
Just quickly, I want to reinforce that you need to get all of your documentation into OPM by 11:59 p.m. on Monday, February the 24th. I mentioned how that when you call the career coaches, please do that if you want additional assistance. And I just want to thank Emily for this excellent presentation.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Diana. I really appreciate it. And thanks, everybody, for your feedback. A lot of people saying it was an excellent, awesome training. I really appreciate that. Deirdre says that I was able to demystify the process for her. So that's great. That's my goal. Absolutely. This is just a very technical process. That's all. But we're here to help. So thank you, Diana, for arranging this. And you guys know what to do next, what the next steps are. So please be in touch. And I know that I will be talking to you soon. Okay, thanks a lot. Bye-bye now.